The New York Jets and Woody Johnson continue their search for a new general manager and head coach. Seems the top offensive candidates don't really want Woody's money, or maybe Woody doesn't want the candidates. I'm Glenn Norton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log on to JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Joined today, as always, by Dylan Terman to go over some of these names, some of the rumors circulating around the team right now. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the Senior Bowl prospects with that inching ever closer, and get some of Dylan's thoughts here. How we doing, Dylan?
I'm doing well. The 33rd team is basically, done their job. They found at least 35 candidates for the Jets at both head coach and GM. So 33rd team, 35 candidates. They've exceeded their number. So I feel like they're doing their hourly diligence for the team. But yeah, this list is growing. And hopefully within the coming days, we have some finalization to at least one of these hires because it feels like it's been dragging forever.
Yeah, as I said the other day, initially I thought maybe Mike Tannenbaum was doing this to sort of build his rapport with as many people as possible because he wants to keep having this job, and he could become the go-to guy if he builds a database of 1,000 coaches he sat down with face to face. Then I started to wonder if he's just trying to get revenge on Woody Johnson and bring in a bunch of trash candidates and be like, "Hey, dude, you fired me. This is what I'm bringing to you." But there are some good candidates on the list. There's a handful of guys you'd like to have. You just hope they don't get scooped up while the process drags out. As I said the other day, a couple of candidates, Organzi and Sullivan, both had second interviews. Both those guys came in and interviewed with the Jets. So, no, I've heard, some of the beat has said expect round 2 of interviews to commence sometime this week. But no word on round 2 of interviews commencing this week. So speculation is that round 2 will begin soon. Nothing solid on that. A couple more candidates that were brought in. Arthur Smith, who failed spectacularly in Atlanta with the Falcons, was brought in. Apparently the Jets like something about him. Bobby Slowick, who between those two, I would say is a better candidate. And then Vance Joseph, the former New York Jet. And if you are old enough, if you're in my age range or older, you remember the Jets absolutely humiliating Vance Joseph on national TV, did that guy wrong. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that story, Dylan. He was basically...
I don't know exactly where you're going with that, no.
He was an undrafted free agent out of, I forget which college now. And I believe he was a quarterback in college. I believe that part may be wrong. It's many years ago. Who they moved to cornerback. So he had no experience really at corner. Was a UDFA, gave him his first career start on Monday Night Football against future Hall of Famer Tim Brown, and he just got cooked up and down the field. And even though he only played a few games as a Jet, I never forgot Vance Joseph's name. For years he went away, then he reemerged as a coach. But the second I heard his name, I was like, oh, that's that dude the Jets did dirty. Like, hey, this is, stand over there. That's cornerback. No, cover that guy. But this is the Jets we're talking about. Should come as no surprise. Not really, he would be fall under the defensive retread banner. I know, fans seem really torn. Does it have to be offense? Does it have to be defense? I've said a million times I prefer offense, but if it's going to be defense, there are a couple of guys I like. The Jets, of course, a story that circulated yesterday. Aaron Glenn, former Jets corner, reportedly has told people that he is leaning toward the Jets. If that's the case, now listen, teams, you can't hire anyone, right? You can't even technically agree to terms. I guess that's because teams not wanting their candidates, they want them fully invested in these playoff runs. So that makes sense. Me personally, looking at the list of candidates, if I'm the Jets, I'm just going to back channel it and say to his agent, hey, will this much money over this many years, will that lock us up, Aaron Glenn, when the Lions are done? And try to get something off the record, but, not in writing, but in agreement. These are the types of things that happen. So I would have no problem with the Jets doing that, but there are other candidates they're considering. Any thoughts on the newest crop of interviewees, Dylan, and any new favorites based on the names that have come in?
Well, you did forget one. We should be nice to Jeff Ulbrich and say he got his interview he got his high and by, his 5 minutes with Woody. What probably
Yeah.
like somebody asked, I think it was on Twitter, like, did they make him fly down to Palm Springs, or did they just remote interview and be like, hey man, like this is basically your exit interview part 2. Like we
I think I
appreciate it,
said
but
they
like
could have done it via text message.
yeah. 2 emojis, the middle finger and then the peace sign. Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what it would be. But no, these names don't inspire me. So yeah, I don't get it. The Arthur Smith thing, that he was one of the guys that when they were gonna hire Saleh, that he was one of the finalists, and then he was supposed to come in and be Hackett's babysitter, but wisely chose to go to the Steelers instead because that was a gig where if anybody took that job, they were just going to be the fall guy. If it didn't work, that person was out. Hackett was fine, and if everything worked well, it wasn't that guy's fault. It was Hackett's, credit. So it seemed like a lose-lose job. So I don't expect Arthur to come and do that last year. Not that I wanted him to do it. And then now this year, they're hiring him again or talking to him again, third time, and it's like Arthur Smith is inevitable here. Like I don't get it. Other than like a cool mustache, like he's got nothing. Like I don't like
think
it.
it's
He
even that
didn't.
cool of a mustache.
Right. That seems to be the perception of other people that rock mustaches. Clearly I can't grow one to save my life, but Arthur Smith, not a guy for me. Bobby Slowick last year would have been like, oh wow, let's put this guy at the top of my list. He's very young. He's under 40. I think he's like 38 or something like that. 36, I think Samini said. But we're the only ones that asked for him. So that makes me nervous, especially coming off a down year where your stud franchise quarterback took a real downturn in production. So Slowick doesn't do anything for me. I didn't know that whole thing about Vance Joseph. So maybe he bumps up a couple of spots due to legacy because he played for the team. But like other than that, no. Like I don't want this
Yeah, I
guy.
think the way things went, that might hurt him for having played for the team. But I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
My buddy's a Broncos fan, and he was like, I really hope we don't lose Vance Joseph to you guys. I'm like, I'm pretty confident in speaking for the fan base when I say we don't want Vance Joseph. Like that's probably not the guy we want. But listening to Connor Hughes on Evan and Tiki a couple of days ago, I'm like halfway through the podcast now. It does seem like the Jets have a type, and we talked about it last week. They have like a lot of ranging backgrounds, but a lot of them are defensive retreads or just defensive guys in general. So my guess is going to be that it's going to be a defensive guy with that quote unquote hot offensive mind, and whichever one, wows the interview the best is probably going to get it. Again, we've talked about it. I like an offensive guy. There's Monken, who never got an interview. Cohen didn't get an interview. Could if they hire Mike Greenberg. I don't know. Ben Johnson, it seemed like neither side wanted either parts of anybody. Again, going back to the Connor Hughes interview, he told the Jets early he didn't want them. But then the Jets also didn't request him because, one, they didn't want to publicly be told no for no reason. But also they didn't think he could handle the media well. It seems to be one of the reasons that Hughes is alluding to. And it kind of makes sense. You listen to the guy in the interviews. He's a smart coach for sure, but he's got that Gase vibe to him. I don't know. He talks to the media. He like kind of has that weird like Gase vibe. I don't know. I get it from him. And he's a Gase guy. So I'm not saying he's not a guy for me, but the Jets clearly had no interest in him. The guy in the background on the YouTube show, Monken, that's the one that doesn't get me. Maybe he is just a little upset that, Gase beat him out in 2019 because that was probably his shot. He was 5-6 years younger, and he was like, oh, wow, I can be a head coach for a decade plus in the league. And now he's almost 60. And he's like, well, now my time is cut short. So maybe he does just not like the Jets because of that. Or he just likes the opportunity to work with a quarterback already in-house, whether that's, I think, Chicago or Jacksonville he interviewed with. So, yeah, I liked the offensive guys coming into the process. Not getting them to even come into the building kind of sucks. But I guess I'm waiting to see the process play out fully before just jumping to they didn't want us or we didn't want them. Because if Aaron Glenn or Brian Flores comes in with a good offensive mind, I'm just as happy with that as just getting the offensive mind in general.
Yeah, I think I have a different take. I feel like if you're not smart enough to realize they're good candidates, or if they're smart enough to not want to come to the Jets, like neither one of those scenarios is something you want. I would, you'd much rather hear that the Jets were interested. Um, but again, what's worse? You're interested and they didn't want you, or you
Right.
weren't
Would you have
interested
rather
because you don't
heard
realize they're good.
right. How many
Like there's
times
not
did
a
we want to
good.
hear the Jets were declined an interview for Liam Cohen or
Yeah,
Todd
they don't
Monken
want that, of
or
course. Yeah.
right. We don't want to see
So
that as fans
like
either.
I understand why the requests aren't being made now. Antoine Staley from Daily News, someone asked him yesterday on Twitter, why didn't they bring in Monken? He said, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
So I think,
And
maybe Antoine's got a little intel there, and Monken, didn't want to come,
yeah,
because really that's the only logical reason why you would not bring him in. Like, you better know he doesn't want to work for you for whatever reason, whether it's because you snubbed him, whether it's because you don't have a young quarterback to develop and you don't have a draft pick to draft a young quarterback to develop. Like, those could be factors. It could be that he's looking and saying, look, I'd rather have Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams versus Aaron Rodgers' final season, followed by developing whichever guy you take in the second, third, fourth round this year, and Jordan
right,
Travis.
right.
So, again, with Monken, it's the age thing makes me think that way. But then the age thing also makes me think, whether he's bitter or not. Look, it's his decision, his life. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd be surprised if he was turning down any interviews, because it's not like he's got 7 and he said, well, I don't want the Jets. Like, he's got 2. I would, if I were him, I'm not, but I would be like, the Jets are dumb. They did something dumb, but if they want to hire me, like, I would consider it if I were him.
See,
But
that's how I view Slowick. Like, we're the only team that is requesting to interview Slowick. So it's like, this is not a situation where the Jets are smarter than 31 other teams. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the
right.
situation to me where it's like, oh God, we're gonna big brain and end up with Bobby Slowick, and I could see that being a disaster. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, with Monken, he was our number one guy, and then Vrabel took over a little bit for me because of all the steam building up there before New England obviously fired Mayo, but it is a little upsetting. I did want to pull up a tweet from our buddy Scott Mason talking about top offenses in the league, and everybody's always like, you need an offensive coach, you need an offensive coach. He went and listed the top 5 teams this year based on points per game. Obviously, a lot of these offensive minds are guys that the Jets haven't talked to, but you look at the Lions, number 1, they have a tight end coach who never called plays. Bills Mafia, McDermott is a defensive coordinator, or was a defensive coordinator. You have Harbaugh with the Ravens, defense and special teams. Bowles with Tampa, defensive coordinator. Dan Quinn in Washington, defensive coordinator. So to me, I don't necessarily see, what's going on and say, oh my gosh, if we miss out on an offensive guy, the whole thing is cooked. I really genuinely think if we get a defensive-minded guy who, like Aaron Glenn said the other day in his interview, I'm a coach. I'm going to look at offense. I'm going to look at defense. All the things that we thought Saul was going to do and didn't do, unfortunately, be the CEO type. And a lot of people are saying, well, this is reasons not to hire Glenn, because it does sound like it could be solid 2.0. But you get a defensive guy with the hotshot offensive coordinator, a lot of things look better than, what if they hired Monken and his defensive coordinator was like a Ron Rivera? You know what I mean? Like, I like the Monken part, but I really don't like the Ron Rivera part. At least I could get with the Glenn part, and then, okay, whatever his offensive coordinator is, Mark Brunell or Hank Fraley, some of these defensive coaches, or Detroit coaches, or Flores and McCown, then I can kind of get on board with it. And I guess you just need to see everybody's staff, but I'm not opposed to defense with the hot shot offensive mind.
Yeah, and I don't even know if opposed is the right word. To me, it's like prefer. Like, I prefer the offensive guy, and I've
Sure.
said why. I like that
Yeah.
extra voice in the room,
Right.
who knows the offensive side of the ball.
Like, it seems like they prefer experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I'm just thinking Glenn is the front runner because his name is out there so much. Samini said weeks ago that Glenn said it's his dream job. Now we're hearing a couple of days ago that Glenn's telling people that's the way he's leaning.
He would love the job and whatnot. Yeah.
And thank goodness for that, because in my mind, it's just my opinion, at this point in time, now that, for whatever reason that they didn't bring in a Monken, a Cohen, or whatever, to me, Glenn is the top candidate. And I think it's his ties to the Jets. It's his relationship with Bill Parcells, the time they spent in New York and New Jersey. I think they're kind of lucking into a guy here, because everyone else is either unproven or no good, or with major flaws. You mentioned Scott, and I told you before we went live, Dylan. For anyone who hasn't checked it out, Scott does an amazing job, and Scott's lucky he's a Jets fan, because he gets a lot of chances to do great shows on coaching searches, because the Jets are bad. But no, if we're honest, they keep their coaches too long. If they were smarter, or if they got rid of guys when they needed to, there'd be even more coaching searches. But there's nobody, whether it's, I don't care who you work for, and this isn't a knock on these guys. I'm just saying, I don't care if you're Samini or Connor Hughes or whoever. Nobody does a better job of digging deep and deep diving on these candidates than Scott does. I took the opportunity the other day to listen to his Aaron Glenn episode. These are hour-long interviews with people who cover the team, either bloggers, writers. He had on one of the guys who covered Aaron Glenn as an author who's written a book on the Lions, on their the whole history of the organization. So Scott goes out and finds people that can go chronologically through their time, from the time they entered the coaching world up till today. And the Aaron Glenn episode and the Brian Flores episode, I mean, talk about night and day. I'm listening to the Flores episode and I can't believe he's getting interviews with anyone. Dylan and I differ here. Dylan likes him. And some of the stuff they talk about. And like I said, go back, listen to the full episode if you haven't. Play Like a Jet, Brian Flores profile talks about how, the benching with and look, I'm not one of these people who's like, oh my God, I can't believe he was mean to one of his players. Like, no, I understand, like in pro sports and really, and in a lot of real jobs, you're going to work with and for people who aren't always so nice to you. And sometimes you just got to suck it up and deal with it. I'm fine with that. But in the case of Flores and Tua, it wasn't a matter of he wasn't nice to Tua. It was more that he was like actively working to sabotage him. Benching him or putting him on IR when he was healthy, telling him he wasn't going to play on a particular day, and then putting him into the game at halftime after telling him like, you're injured, you're too hurt to play, you're not playing today. Pulling him out of games he said he wouldn't, or naming him the starter, saying, "Yep, he's our guy," and literally like a week or two later pulls him out at halftime again. So it was such egregious malpractice that I can't believe people would consider him for a job. And there was other stuff too. Like I said, listen to that episode and listen to the Aaron Glenn episode. Total opposite, knows how to talk to people. And one example Scott uses, and Scott and I have talked about this in the past, because every now and then you do get these stories in the press where they're like, oh, this coach was treated this player a certain way and it was different than he treated other players. And it's like, yeah, like, and what Scott always references, and I remember years ago hearing this, Bill Parcells talking about, or actually Parcells is the guy who I remember doing it, but Phil Jackson, different sport, but same concept. They would say, why, he was asked one time, why are you so hard on Shaq? You are on his back, in his face, screaming at him, and then you treat Kobe with kid gloves. And Phil Jackson was like, you have to know your players. Mm-hmm. Shaq grew up in a military family with discipline and structure, and a kid who could tolerate someone getting in your face. Whereas Kobe, softer upbringing, a bit more delicate, came into the league very young. So he knew his guys. Like, I need to treat this guy this way and this guy this way. And that I'm fine with that. If there's a guy you feel like you need to get in his face, then do it. But when you have a guy like Tua, a young quarterback, who doesn't seem like the biggest hard ass, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tua is like the most feared guy in the NFL. But I think that he's, and especially when you're talking young quarterback and the importance of the position, the importance of confidence, to do what he did to him, to like go out of his way to sabotage. Like, your job is to develop the guy, and he was doing the 180 opposite of that. Is, I'm going to tear this guy down. I want that guy nowhere near my locker room, but being that he's that bad, I tend to think that's who the Jets will go for. But I'm hoping it's Aaron Glenn instead.
Yeah, I think if there was like multiple players that he did this with, I would see it more as like a problem moving forward. There's a lot of reports when he was the head coach of Miami that him and Greer didn't see eye to eye on the quarterback class, and Greer really pushed for Tua over Herbert in that draft. Clearly, we know the answer was probably Herbert in that situation. Not, again, excusing his behavior. A lot of Jets fans like the fact that he did this with Tua as like a reason to come here. I don't like it as like a reason to hire Flores, but I do think that going from the situation where he was asked to lose football games with a quarterback that he hated into a better situation with more stability and structure with the Steelers, and then turning that into a DC gig with one of the hottest offensive coaching head coaches in Kevin O'Connell, something's got to give. You learn something along the way. Not saying he's the perfect fit for head coach. But if he is going to bring like a Josh McCown offensive coordinator type, I kind of like that. So it's not that I love Flores or I love everything he's about. He's a hard ass, and I like that. I think the team needs that. I think him and Glenn both would work in the same realm of like, say they wanted to keep Aaron Rodgers. I don't think either of those guys is going to let Rodgers overpower him. I think they would still be the power of like, power of attorney, I guess, so to speak. But I don't know. Flores to me is just intriguing because I give him the more of the benefit of the doubt that he's learned from his situations, and I like a guy who's been there, done that. Glenn's still my number one guy. I would probably put Flores 3. And the guy that I would even put above Flores is a guy we haven't interviewed yet, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, but not to switch topics. But Joe Brady is a name that was requested, has not interviewed yet, but is an offensive guy. Is Brady a guy that moves the needle for you? Because he's probably number 2 of the remaining guys right behind Glenn for me.
Yeah, I do like him. I mean, how can you not like what he's done in Buffalo? Even I understand he's got Josh Allen, which is going to make his life easier. But the way they've deployed, from what little I've watched, the handful of games I've watched, lots of different packages, just switching. What's driven me nuts over the years with the Jets is the predictability of it all. It seems like defenses have no problem figuring out what the Jets are trying to do. Whereas with Buffalo, I feel like on a given drive, they'll show more than the Jets will show in a full game. And that's Brady. That's a philosophy. And I think that's the way the league is now. If you're going to dominate, you have to keep teams on their toes. I feel like he does that. I feel like you see a lot of different guys get involved in the offense, which again boggles my mind. I feel like once every few years the Jets get a game where it's like, hey, 11 different guys caught a pass and they ran a trick play, and it's like, oh my God, it's like they played a modern day version of NFL football. And then the following week, 4 different dudes catch a pass, same 2 guys ran the ball, nothing tricky, and it's so much of that. But yeah, I feel like in Buffalo, the way they deploy so many different personnel and get everybody involved, that keeps everybody on their toes, it keeps everybody engaged. And I do like teams that do that. So Brady did they request him?
Yeah,
I know you said
he was one of the very first names.
I was going to say, I remember seeing his name, but I don't remember like seeing his name early, but I don't recall hearing him he's interviewed.
He never took a first round interview. So okay. I would be intrigued if like they hypothetically Buffalo loses this weekend, maybe instead of having him in for a remote and then in person, let's just say they hire Brian Gain, the guy from Buffalo that they interviewed with, say they hire him Sunday and then the Bills lose. And then you have your first in-person interview with Joe Brady. Maybe that's something they want to do. The only coach that they've had an interview with that they could potentially hire that would make me happy is Aaron Glenn. And it was just a remote interview. So like they have to get eliminated from the playoffs for him to even be hired. Right. Like you said, I would love it if they said with any of these guys, like, hey, when you're done, this is what we have waiting for you. And we want to get it done now, behind the scenes. We don't have to expose anything yet. But that being said, it seems like everything has been very tight-lipped coming out of these interviews. We have no idea which way they're looking. We can only just guess based on their preferences of past hires. So I don't know. I like Brady a lot, and we'll see. I guess this weekend is telling. I'll be rooting against all the teams that have coaches that I want, unfortunately, and that's just how it is. Unfortunately, that means I can root for the Ravens, but that's been my selection for a couple weeks now. So, Monken, you're not coming here, so I guess I can root for you to knock out Brady. So hopefully we get a Brady interview. But I think Brady's the last offensive guy because they interviewed Slowick today, who we've both agreed we're not really high on, and Josh McCown is the only offensive name left. And there's still technically a chance we get him with Flores. So, like, I'm not too worried if McCown is not our head coach. I wouldn't hate it. I don't think he's probably Josh McCown is number 4 on my list. It goes Glenn, Brady, Flores, and then probably McCown based on like the realistic names available. Like I would take McCown over Slowick in a heartbeat, over Arthur Smith in a heartbeat. Do we even need to talk about Mike Locksley? No. Matt Nagy, I would take McCown over Matt Nagy in a heartbeat. So, yeah, I think you get down to McCown real quick. I don't know if you like McCown as a head coach, probably just more as an OC, but he's fourth on my list.
I love McCown as an OC. and it's, that you do see examples of guys who have never been coordinators who succeed at head coach, but I just feel like I feel like it's a natural progression. Like you've got to have that step, otherwise there's this gap. Because I mean, if that blows up in your face, how you can't really say, "Oh, we didn't think that was going to happen." Like you literally hired a dude who didn't do the job before that one. Like
Yeah.
it's like you drafted a quarterback who only hands the ball off. You never watch them throw. You only
Yep.
Man, he's great at handing off. Okay, right, but can he throw it? We'll find that out later. Like I want to see that he's done more. But McCown, yeah, like I said, my dream scenario was Monken, and he brings McCown on as his OC.
Oh,
But
that'd be great.
obviously that
Yeah.
that won't be happening. You'd love to have McCown learning under him. But
Hmm.
yeah, McCown is just a unique candidate, and I mentioned him. I mentioned Josh Johnson, who I feel whenever he hangs him up and retires, he should get into coaching because
Hmm.
if you're a quarterback in this league, starter or not, if you manage to stick around for 10, 15 years and you've played in all these systems for all these coaches, like the amount of knowledge those two guys must have is just, off the charts. So I would be, you know, I'd be very happy with McCown as an OC. As a head coach, I don't know. And like I said, the thing with Aaron Glenn is the job he's done this year despite all the injuries. Like that's the
For
type of
sure.
stuff you look for. And I say all the time, and I don't, I understand that it all boils down to winning. But sometimes I say we're obsessed with winning. And what I mean by that is we ignore some incredible, whether it's players or coaches, sometimes we ignore people doing amazing things because the record isn't good. I'm
Right.
like, well, if you have a 1-win roster and you win 6 games, that's amazing. I'm
Hmm.
not going to be like, oh, well, you only won 6. Yeah, most guys would have won 1 or 2.
Like the
And I'm not saying
Commanders
that's the
this
case with
year.
Aaron
Yeah.
Glenn,
Yeah.
but where with most coordinators, you lose the number of guys Aaron Glenn has lost, you would at least see a significant drop in production. They've carried on playing really well. So Aaron Glenn has shown that, not only function under adversity, but thrive under adversity. So he's my number one right now. Um, and I just feel like Dylan, and I said to you before we started recording, this is just a matter of don't screw it up, Jets. If the reports are true, if Rich
Yeah.
Cimini is right in
Yeah.
that this is his dream job, and the rumors are from a couple of days ago are that the Jets are where he wants to be, and they go out and hire a lesser candidate, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
And,
But
and I know we'll differ on this, but there's what 6 or 7 gigs open. I think the Patriots obviously technically is closed, so we'll say 6. I think open right now. I think the Jets are better than the Saints. Like Saints got shit compared to the Jets. They're in cap hell. They really don't have a quarterback because Derek Carr's like, I'm not leaving and I'm not taking a pay cut. So you got to cut me and eat all that money. They don't really have draft picks. I mean, the Jets have every draft pick, technically, not their current 3rd-round pick. They have
yeah,
Detroit's, but they have 8 draft picks. They have 2 4s and 2 5s or something like that. Like they have a abundance of draft picks. They're not missing any. So like I think they're way more attractive than the Saints. And if it comes down to legacy, yeah, he played and coached or played for the Jets, coached for the Saints. Did he play for the Saints? I don't remember.
yeah.
Yeah. So like,
Oh wait, no, played for the Cowboys. I think he played for the Saints.
I wasn't sure if he played for the Saints. I knew he coached, obviously, but like, I would take the Jets if I was Aaron Glenn because I think it's a much more attractive destination. That's just my opinion. I know the Jets aren't high on the list. I would put them probably 5th of the 6. Maybe the Saints are the only one worse than them. But if that's what it is for Aaron Glenn, just the Saints and the Jets, I'm like, this is an easy decision. And then I
Yeah,
would
he played.
let
He
like
played one. He played 4 games in his final season with the Saints.
4 games. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's not. Yeah, I was just
but
checking
like,
because I knew I could
yeah.
picture him in a Saints uniform, and I'm like, what the heck?
Right. But like Mike McCarthy going to the Saints, that'd be one that would intrigue me, and like obviously give the Jets a better shot at at Aaron Glenn. But I don't know if I consider it a situation where they have to not mess it up, but it's teetering on that because the names after that are very uninspiring. But it seems like they do have a pivot in Flores. Like if Glenn does go to the Saints or whatever, and all the spots end up getting filled and they don't have a dance partner, it seems like Flores is going to be the pivot guy more so than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get and the thing with Glenn, like as I said earlier, and you mentioned, do you go make some type of back channel offer now to lock him up and then
Yeah.
know that you can move forward? I don't know if that's the route they'll go, but I mean, really all of us, with the exception of the report on Glenn wanting the Jets, um, I don't know who the pivot is. It might be Flores.
Hmm.
Um, Slowick interviewed. It could be the Arthur Smith thing. I mean,
It could be him.
that worries me that
Oh,
it
for
might
sure.
be.
For sure.
Um, I could see that happening. I mean, the thing is, you can't rule anything out. We
We
don't know anything to be true, but
we have a comment about a name, and I think it's a dark horse name, like he's saying. Mr. Green Jean says, "Don't overlook Jeff Hafley, defensive coordinator for the Packers that they just requested." I have a Packers buddy. I've mentioned him a bunch of times on this show. The first thing he said to me was, "Hell no, we don't want him to go." Like they had to
that
put
year
up
has
with
done a
Joe
great job.
Barry. They had to put up with Joe Barry for a long time in Green Bay. I think like 3 or 4 seasons, and like it was one of those situations where you knew it was just not going to end well for him. And now they finally get Jeff Hafley from I think Boston College, and things turned around. It's not the greatest defense by any means, and they certainly struggled generating pressure against the Eagles with their front four, but they just didn't have the horses up front anymore. So
Right.
Jeff Halfway is a name like that's truly a dark horse candidate. Uh, Mr. Green Jean says low key program builder. I don't know exactly the extent of his success in Boston College, but he was talked of highly when hired in Green Bay. So that's a name that was just requested that intrigues me. But that couples with this one that says from Rob, the GM selection has Jets fans more nervous than the head coach position. Glenn, you and I just talked for a half hour about the head coach position, and we didn't once mention general manager. Do you feel the same way as Rob here?
I feel, and I'm not saying it's not important, and I said this at the beginning of this whole process, is that with all of this, the coaches, lesser so with some of the coaches, the GMs, there is no position where we are more blind than GM. It's almost not worth talking about. Almost like it has to be discussed because it's important. But unless you're bringing in a guy like Dimitrov, who has proven he can build a winner, you're just guessing what a bunch of assistants would do if they were in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And even you could say, oh, well, Glenn, it's the same thing with a coach. Not really, because you can, if again, in most
You
cases,
see
you
their
can
unit
see,
on the field.
yeah, it's not just you can say, here's what this guy likes to do. He likes to blitz. He likes to press. He likes this. He likes, five wide. He likes whatever philosophy he has and deploys. You can say, well, I know he likes that. Whereas with GM candidates, it's okay. I know he worked for that GM who was good, but as I said when I said the other day, John Idzik came from the Seahawks at a time when they were drafting all pros in the 5th round. Oh, look, we just plucked a guy from a team that drafts better than anyone. Great. And we found a guy who couldn't draft as well as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's look, we'll guess, we'll find ways to say we feel good about it. There will be zero Jets fans when this GM is announced saying this guy's gonna suck because we don't know.
Unless it's
Um,
Grigson.
Correct. Yes. Which was reportedly debunked. I don't know, like literally a day
Yeah,
or two after everyone said he was like
they
leaving
fell
the
for the
clubhouse,
bait. Everybody
everyone
fell for
backed
the
off.
cheese, man. I think Grigson started that rumor, truthfully, that like, hey, if Flores gets a job, I'm gonna be his guy. I think that was like a total thing just made up by Grigson because as soon as 3 beat reporters wrote it, I was like, oh no, like this is actually
Because that's the
happening.
thing, like you rarely see three of them
And
pounce
then
on the
I
same
think it was
thing.
Kaz. I think it was Kaz. He was like, look, we were fed some stuff. We believed the source. It turned out to
Right.
be inaccurate. And I was like, well, I'm glad that one of you guys caught it because 3 beat reporters saying the same Grigson,
I thought it was
Flores,
four.
McCown.
I thought it was didn't I thought Rosenblatt,
It might have been
Connor, and
4. It might have
Staley,
been
right?
4. I might not have seen the 4th one, but I saw for sure 3. And I
Whoever
was
it
like, this
was,
is
it was enough that it
yeah,
was
it was
like,
too
oh my
many
God, is this a
because it was
thing?
Rich too, and I was like, Rich. I mean, he predicted Borgonzi Glenn, so like for him to say this now, it's like shit. He was
Right.
really fed something that was serious, but I think it was a lot of Grigson hyping it up and not so much what is actually going to happen because it did get debunked very quickly, which relieved a lot of pressure for me because that's literally the only guy on this list that's like, shit, we're doing worse. Like even
Yeah.
Louis Riddick after his tweet about I don't know why teams aren't interviewing Monken. I'm like, dude, you shot up to like number 3 on my list now. Like, if you want Monken and you want to come here, yeah, dude, come over. But he's not coming here, obviously.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, I think that, eh, and I said maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I was surprised with the way he worded that. Like you just interviewed with the Jets who are not interviewing Monken, and you tweet out if you're not interviewing Monken, you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, when is
So it's
Louis
like,
Riddick
ooh,
not taking a shot at the Jets? Let's be honest.
and that's the other point I made. Like he's
Yeah,
constantly
yeah.
bagging on them. Why in the world would they
Well, it seems
go
like
out and
they're
pay
not
again?
hiring anybody out of ESPN, whether it's Riddick or Rex Ryan. So that's probably a good thing. Let's be honest.
I won't make any jokes about ESPN people getting jobs they perhaps don't deserve. Um,
Uh-oh.
yeah, but anyway, moving on from that. But yeah, nobody for me looking at the GM candidates, the names that have come out. I don't think there's anyone new from the last time we spoke. Well, I guess well since
Brian
I
Gaine.
did the show I did that solo show the other day because
Yeah.
some names were coming out and Sullivan I mentioned, Brian Gaine came in.
Hmm.
What about and I'm not even as a name. Let's just give a guy credit where it's due. I can't even remember. Was it Chris with the Don Shula's grandson for the Rams the other day, and that defense pressuring Sam
Oh, yeah.
Darnold 26 pressures.
What was
That
it, like
isn't
8
like
sacks or
I'm
something?
watching that game and I'm like, man, Darnold is losing so much money right now, and I'm like, hang on, like who would be succeeding right now? Like this is I didn't even think it was that bad, but after it was either 24 or 26 times he was pressured. I think it was 24. Either one is way too many. No one is gonna. You're getting hit, sacked, chased 24 times. That's a hell of a job by Shula, man. That I mean, he was trending the
Dude,
next day. He's all over social media, and I'm like, man, how long he had the job? Because that
I
bring that dude in for a conversation.
saw people talking too much about the Vikings having it easy against the Rams, and I was like, the Rams are not a team that you can tread lightly with.
Oh,
Like
were people saying that? Really, I
they
missed
are
that.
such a good team for saying F them picks, and they hit on their picks anyway. Like
Yeah,
Jared Verse was a guy I talked about probably a couple times in the offseason last year. Is like, well, let's go off the cuff. They went Will McDonald. Like, let's see if they go edge again. Like Jared Verse would be the guy, and Jared Verse is special. So that defense is what they've done post Aaron Donald is pretty special.
yeah. And Lauren says here, and I can't remember if we touched on this. I think we did briefly. Any
Yeah.
concerns with Greenberg with the cap background being a like every time I hear that I think John Idzik. Um,
So yeah, I do have a problem with it being like his calling card. But then again, I joke about Alec Hallaby and what he looks like physically, and I
it's
genuinely
different.
think he's a good candidate too. He's got a really good analytics background, and I can't sit up here and say I value analytics and then turn my nose up to the guy who has the analytics background. Obviously, Dimitrov would be preferred because he
That's why
has
I like
analytics
Dimitrov
plus
because he's
experience for
yeah,
sure. But like, say
exactly.
they hired like a Dimitrov and one of these guys, like a Greenberg. I would love that. So yeah, I don't think Greenberg solely would like move the needle for me, but like hypothetically they hire Greenberg and now it's like, okay, let's interview Liam Cohen and at least get an interview with him and see what he has to say. Then it moves the needle. But no, I don't love the cap background calling card. Spy Tech from Tampa was the guy that I was kind of circling because he had like more of a
That's so
all
that
encompassing background, more so than I'm just saying background wise. He was
if
the
ever
guy that
there
I
was a
would have
name of a guy
preferred.
that should work for Tom Brady, I mean, seriously,
Oh
how do
yeah,
the
for
Raiders not
sure.
hire a guy named Spy Tech? I
Seriously.
mean, come on. I heard the name. I
Well,
thought
he
it was a
did work
joke. I
with
was waiting.
Brady.
I thought it was
He
like,
did
oh, he's
work
gonna
with
get
Brady
paid.
technically when
What's
Brady
that?
was in Tampa. He technically did work with Spy Tech. Obviously,
Exactly.
he might follow him, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, link
So
Brady with Spy Tech.
yeah, I'm confused by this Wow Wave. You said can't wait for Dion to rip us again. Do you mean just like in the media when he doesn't take the job here? Because we're not. I don't think any Jets fan is interested in having Dion here.
No, that's not what he's talking about. He the other day apparently, and I saw this on JetNation. I didn't hear it myself. I saw it on Twitter a couple of times too, but Dion apparently has said that the Jets are one of the teams he will not allow his son to come to. Um, Now this comes as no surprise to me because I remember when Dion made those comments weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, where he laid out what a team must have in place before he'll let his son play for them. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, you might as well just say not the Jets. It was
It's
like
the Ben Johnson
stability,
thing again. Yeah.
ability to develop quarterbacks,
Yeah.
all the things the Jets don't and really never have had. So and I said at that point, I was like, anyone who's thinking Shador, you can take him off your list because Coach Prime just said he ain't coming here. But now
I
apparently,
like Shadur and like his film was fine, but like no way. Not even a
yeah,
chance in hell would I entertain Dion and his kid in New York. No.
yeah,
He
and
would handle
yeah,
the media fine, but like nothing else would go right. Truly.
Yeah, I think
Nothing. So
I
he
think
can rip
Dallas
us
will be
all he
interesting
wants. I
for them.
really don't care. He can go to Dallas. He can deal with Woody. He can trade Dak Prescott to go get his kid. Like, that's the shit I don't want on this team, to be honest. And if it works for Dallas, that's great. Like, I don't want to be the team that takes that risk.
Yeah, so Wild Wave is saying it was said on
Yeah,
social
on
media.
social media. I get it. I
That
didn't
wasn't
I
his
didn't
one.
understand. I didn't see this originally. I was like,
Yeah,
rip
like
us.
I
Like,
said, I saw it
what
on
did he
the
say?
forums.
I mean, cool, Dion, dude. Like, honestly, no one cares what you have to say about the Jets. I'll be honest. We're picking 7th. So if your kid lasts till 7, that's probably a problem.
Yeah,
In a
well,
not so
that's
loaded
gonna be an
draft that
interesting
has no
thing to see where
quarterbacks.
he goes.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
he's going to go to
I'm trying to
Dallas if he
see.
ends up in Dallas. But
Say
it's
that again.
funny
Sorry.
because Dion, hold on now, because Dion reported, he quote tweeted a couple weeks ago that this reporter said that his kid wasn't going to Cleveland or Tennessee when they held the picks that were high up in the draft. And he's like, I would never tell anybody where my kid's going or not going. So what the hell are you doing here, dude?
But
That's exactly what you're doing here, dude.
I think he said he wouldn't do it publicly. I think he said he might make some phone calls and let teams know. He said he wouldn't do it publicly, which he now
A
apparently is
tweet
doing.
came out that said the Browns and the Titans were told that Shador would not play for them, and he quote tweeted it and was like, "You're lying out your ass." So like, if you're gonna say you don't want to determine where your kid's playing, but you're gonna determine where your
He
kid,
will.
we all knew
He
you're
will.
gonna Eli Manning the situation anyway. Like, let's be honest. So
Yeah.
your kid wore Giants cleats to
John
the
Elway
game.
situation because John Elway was the first one to
Sure,
do it.
your kids wore Giants cleats to the game. Ain't nothing happening with the Jets, and we're fine with it. To me, I'm
Yeah.
fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm not
Give me
risking the
Cam Ward
franchise
or
for
give me
Dion and
Cam
Shador.
Ward.
Yeah, give me Cam Ward 100%. And that's not a I love pancakes, so I hate waffles argument. I like both quarterbacks, but give me Cam Ward 11 times out of 10 because it's not coming with elephants and peanuts and clowns on trapeze acts. Like it's not coming with that.
Yep. Absolutely. 100% agree. And we move on for our last few minutes. Dylan, let's talk a little bit about some more Senior Bowl prospects. Watched a handful of games the last couple days, get a closer look at some of these guys. And some of them we still don't know 100% will be coming out. So it's like you see a guy make a
Yesterday was
play.
the declaring deadline, so we should
Oh,
know
was
most of
okay.
it.
So I don't know how quickly PFN updates their player pool
Mm-hmm.
to take those guys out. But guy who jumped out at me today watching I'd literally only hadn't really watched him at all other than a few snaps where he popped out earlier in the year. Keon Sabb, safety for Alabama. Showed a lot of range against Tennessee, covering some deep balls. Showed that he could get to the ball and be a factor. I'm trying to think. One play in particular, deep ball down the right sideline. He covered a ton of ground to get there, and sort of the receiver was falling down backwards, and he had a dive to get within range. And sometimes with the all 22, it's tough to tell if he got a hand on the ball, but he got a hand in there and disrupted the catch, and the pass was incomplete. But just seeing the amount of ground he was able to cover once he made the read was really impressive because that's something the Jets haven't had in a very long time. And then of course you've got the other safety there uh, um, at Alabama, who's the more high profile guy, probably Malachi Moore,
Yep.
the bigger hitter, but still does a solid enough job in coverage. I think the Jets they need a couple of safeties. So whether you want to get a guy who can cover a ton of ground on the back end or a guy who can cover a little bit of ground but offer more in run support, you got a couple of guys there in Alabama who might be able to offer something. I'm not sure if
And
you watched. Go
I
ahead.
have not watched Saab, but I've watched Malachi Moore. Just real quick on Keon Saab, Glassboro, New Jersey native. So
Okay.
I'm 100% down with that 4-star prospect. Just doing some bare minimum surface level digging on him right now. But yeah, I would definitely be intrigued. The safety position is in tatters right now. So maybe one of them comes back and we have 1 out of 4 positions locked down. I'd like to see Jarius Monroe compete for a spot next year. But yeah, Saab, Moore, any of these guys. I think last week I talked about Makuba as well. Any of those safeties. Like literally there's not a safety that I can't be talked into or out of, in this draft cycle because we just need the help so bad.
That's the thing, and I think I'd feel comfortable with them going with 2 tight ends and 2 safeties in this draft because it's
100%. I saw your
the
tweet
holes on
earlier
the
about
roster are
take
big
2
enough.
tight ends. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if we talked specifically about the tight ends who are going to be in Mobile. Let's see how many we have.
We did briefly talk about Dipri
Yeah, we
and
talked
I
about
think
him.
Fannin.
Jake Briningstool out of Clemson.
Mhm.
Good receiver. He's a move piece, so like a lot of guys nowadays. He'll line up in the slot too, but just not a very good blocker. Jackson Hawes. It's been a little while since I watched him, so I won't comment on him right now. Mason Taylor. I think Mason Taylor slightly better blocker than Briningstool. Neither one is great. But if I had to take the more all-around player, the guy who could, catch the ball, good hands, big target, a guy you could use in the red zone, a guy who can, again, almost all these guys, you can move them around. I would probably take Taylor over Briningstool, but either one would be, I could see taking them and using them as a sort of a second round or a second string guy. Gavin Bartholomew out of Pitt, guys, he doesn't block well enough for his size. He's an absolute house. He's an enormous target, really big dude. Wish he was more physical as a blocker because I think he has the ability to be really, really dominant, basically, if he would use that size to his advantage. Gunnar Helm out of Texas, I think one of the better all around guys. Good enough. I think you're muted, Dylan. I
Yeah,
didn't hear
yeah,
that.
that's my
Oh,
guy. Sorry,
okay.
that was my dog had me muted. But yeah, Gunnar Helm was
Gotcha.
the guy I think I brought up last week, but he's one of my favorites. But then also the Miami guy. And dude, do you think Cam Ward's accepting his Senior Bowl invite? Because I'm getting mad now because I thought he was going for sure, and now it doesn't look like he's going to accept.
I don't think so. I mean, when
Yeah,
he's
and
got to know
Shadur's
he's a
going
top
to the
2 or 3
East-West
pick.
Shrine, so
Yeah, I thought that was weird, and that was announced weeks ago. I don't
yeah.
know what they did to make that
They
happen.
they made like a big presentation about them offering him the invitation, but then he didn't accept. So it's like you made a big spiel about nothing. I get it. I get it. You want to have quarterback one in your program for the week. Yeah, Lauren, she always has an opinion, of course. But I was
Yeah, she doesn't
excited to see
care
Cam
either.
Ward. I was excited to see Cam Ward with like all of the Miami offense because they had Arroyo, they had Martinez, they had a couple linemen there too. So like they were getting ready to have like the half of their offense there, and it would have been really
Yeah.
cool to see Cam, but it doesn't look like it's happening. I'm gonna have to get up real quick and get her to stop.
Yeah, that's fine. Do what you got to do. So yeah, the tight end, the tight end class as a whole is really good. Um, Matavo, Maliki Matavo from UCLA, I don't believe I've watched. That's one of the problems I run into. Not really problems, but um, years ago when I started saving highlights of players I liked, and then it just became and any guys who made a bunch of plays. There's times I'll be like, oh, I've never watched that guy, and then I'll search my database and I'll have like 5 plays from him, but I watched him 2.5 years ago as a freshman or a sophomore, and I'm like, oh, I have, and then I watch, and then it refreshes my memory. But off the top of my head, I don't think I've seen Matavo from UCLA. I know I've watched several UCLA games because I like some of their players, but
Hmm.
he doesn't ring a bell right now. But I know I'm gonna get. I still have a fair number of guys I haven't watched, but I'm at the moment I'm getting through like 5 games a day, and I'm trying to pick at least a couple games where there's like 3, 4, 5 prospects, and so it takes a while to get through that game, but you come out of it with an idea on 5 guys, and you do that a couple times, and within a few days you've got 20 plus players scouted. So
Yep.
that's what I'm trying to do right
It's the
now.
best when you can watch a wide receiver and like an offensive tackle in the same game and just like run the play back again and scout them both
Yep.
at the same time. It makes it so much easier. Like the
Yeah,
Georgia team
or
of like
a head-to-head
2021.
matchup between a corner and a receiver.
Yes,
Those are ideal. Pass
exactly.
rusher against a tackle, stuff like that. That works out
Yeah.
really well.
No.
I mentioned the Alabama game. I'm halfway through that Alabama Tennessee. I think I'm in the third quarter. Like I'll tell you what, man, that game Tennessee's got some receivers, dude. Like they got that
They
young
have a young
quarterback whose name I
quarterback
can't
too.
pronounce. Yeah,
Hmm.
but he was off on his deep balls against Alabama.
Hmm.
Tennessee got behind that secondary so many times, like guys wide open for big touchdowns. And I think I've counted at least 4 overthrows on would-be touchdowns on deep balls.
Hmm.
Squirrel White, really good. Brew McCoy, not as much of a speed guy, but with his size and the speed he does have, I love Brew McCoy. He's one of the first guys I started recording highlights on when I started doing this a few years ago. Thought he might come out last year. He didn't. He went back to school, but he's like 6'5", 220. Runs really well for a guy that big. He's got some injury history. He's not there, is he? He's not at the Senior
Yeah,
Bowl. I
no,
don't
Brew
think.
McCoy is going to be at the
Is he?
Senior
Oh,
Bowl.
that's
I was
awesome.
just going to ask, is he going to be the guy that like turns heads, or is he going to be more of like the Luke McCaffrey type who just kind of has like a really solid week all week and it just improves his draft stock drastically? So
It's going to
it's
be
always fun.
interesting. And the other guy, actually, Dylan, who I think we talked about him a few weeks ago because I sent out that tweet of him, Savion Williams. Like, this
Yes.
is going to be a chance for him to maybe, hopefully, get some better quarterback play than he's had in college and a chance to make some plays. He's a versatile dude, brings a lot to the table. He's, you always look for those guys like, where's that guy who's going to be a better pro than he was in college? Excuse me. I think Savion Williams falls under that. I think Lacey, the tight end from Iowa, who we mentioned earlier. I think maybe
Yeah.
Ben Urasek, another tight end who was a Stanford kid, transferred to Georgia. I expected really big things from him in Georgia. He didn't do anything. He wasn't even involved in the offense. But he's huge. I've seen him. He's not afraid to go over the middle. He gets blasted, holds on to the ball. So Ben Urasek is a guy who's, I think, I don't think he's there.
No, he's not on the list.
Yeah, I was just going off on tight ends there and forgot it was Senior Bowl centric. But
I have a wide receiver that just got added to the list, and I love when they have South Alabama players play in the Senior Bowl because it's their home turf. We saw it last year with who the hell was the quarterback we saw last year? Why am I blanking on his name?
I don't know, but I am too.
Yeah, but he ended up having a really good week, and he was comfortable in his environment.
Bradley Carter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So he ended up having a pretty good week. Obviously, it didn't turn out to be draft-related results, but like that familiarity definitely helps. So, did you have any like thoughts on Jamal Pritchett? I feel like it's a name you've brought up to me before. Maybe I'm misremembering, but that I always like hearing the South Alabama kids going to Senior Bowl.
Jamal Pritchett doesn't ring a bell.
No, maybe it's a different Pritchett that you've told me about. So I thought that I would ask, but
yeah, it could be. It's let me see if I have anything. Like I said, sometimes I have something on these guys and I forget. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of players I have highlights on now. I mean, it's
you said you have a couple more players to watch, and I'm like, how do you have any more players to watch? Yeah, Jamal Pritchett.
Yeah, I do have him here. So yeah,
see, there you go. He had 1,100 yards, 91 receptions, 9 touchdowns. Last year, he had 8 touchdowns and 883 yards. So, basically 2.5 seasons with South Alabama and over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns.
Let's see what I got on him. I probably here we go. Okay. I don't know if these are both the same play with different titles. That happens sometimes.
Little pop pass.
Okay, and see what else I got on him.
Don't hate that, being a fan of Malachi Corley, but
yeah,
how many gadget players are going to be misused in our offense?
Oh my God! And don't think he's got the physical presence.
No, it doesn't. He looks like he's a little slender.
Let's see what this one is.
Little mesh.
I mean, he looks elusive, and that's he plenty speed.
Oh yeah,
stop and go. Yeah,
I like that. Those are the types that I kind of
I want to see if he can be a return guy. Like, does he have return history?
Yeah, you mentioned the other receiver who's 6'5" before, Brew McCoy, and I'm like, okay, I kind of tend to not necessarily dislike them, but I always love the shifty slot guys like the Elijah Moores of the world. So that guy's definitely going to be on my list of watchers for that week. I'm still trying to figure out a plan of how the hell I'm going to watch all these guys. Last year when it was you and me, we were able to kind of break it up and be like, okay, you watch this and we'll report back to each other. But now I'm back solo and I'm like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to watch offense, defense, all at once. It's going to be very, very frustrating, but also very fun.
Yeah. I mean, you'll have a great time regardless.
Mm-hmm. But I'm going to be watching a lot of Milrow, I think. I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. Watch like first day quarterbacks, last day quarterbacks. Everything else in between is probably going to be O-line, D-line, just because we could take one of these quarterbacks. This is Brew McCoy. For you. Yeah. Yeah, see, he's lanky. But that quarterback, I will butcher his name if I try to pronounce it, but he's pretty talented. And he's like a redshirt freshman or something.
Yeah. So, young guy. I like him a lot. from what little bit I've seen of him. I think I watched him in their opener, and I was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And just rifle for an arm, but he's got to
Yeah.
get it under control. That was, like I said, that was the thing that jumped out against Alabama. He made some good throws, but there were times where DBs were smoked, and he was overthrowing the receivers, and even some of the completions, like sort of diving, like extra effort to not let it be an overthrow.
Hmm.
But lots to watch in the Senior Bowl coming up. I'm gonna get a ton more games watched this week. Same as I did the other day. I'm gonna log on and go to actually, I'm gonna resume that Tennessee Alabama game now, and
Hmm.
then move on to something else. Got anything else for us, Dylan?
No, that's it really. Other than some guest appearances I'll be doing this week or this upcoming week with our buddy Gus Toon on Saturday at noon. I'll be doing a pod with him, so make sure you check out Atlantic Flight Podcast. And then the following week I'll be with Connor Long, the young 13-year-old, the up and comer on the YouTube channel. So I'll be doing a couple spots here and there leading up to Senior Bowl, but yeah, just trying to get as many of these guys watched as possible. I think it's going to be more of a fact-finding mission than anything else when I go down to Mobile, but it's honestly fun that way too. And you don't know anything about some of these guys, and then you're learning everything up front, like right then and there in front of your face. I think that's probably the best way to learn about some of these guys. So I'm really excited about this. I think I've mentally checked out of work already. There's still like a whole week between now and the trip. So it'll be tough.
All right, that'll wrap it up for us, Jets fans. Have a good one. We'll catch you next week.